Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by Matt Kling.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, did we podcast together recently?
Yeah, last Wednesday.
Did we do it together last Wednesday?
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
can't
we
keep track of these
recorded at
things.
like 10 a.m. I think.
Oh, your name might have been wrong last week then.
Ah,
You might have said Mason Clark under your face.
nice.
I don't know. Because I had to change it today, so I was super confused. You know what's not confusing, though? Is how amazing the deals are at our sponsor at Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. And you can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. I thought that was a good one, and I was expecting a chuckle from you, and I got nothing.
Sorry, that would be good though. Getting 4% off of every order would be good.
I thought you meant getting the chuckle would be good. You know what else is awesome though is over on our Discord. If you want to join the Discord, the links are in the show note. We just did that free $500 tournament. We're gonna be doing one of those every quarter plus an invitational. So check that out if you want to get better at Magic the Gathering and talk to other people who want to get better. Our Discord is a great place to do that. Let's give a special shout out to our newest patron. Then we got Dennis Trinkle as our newest patron. Dennis, thank you so much. It means the world. I know you get Dennis the link to the Facebook group, as Dennis is one of our constructed critics, and those donations are the best. They mean so much to us, and we really appreciate it, Dennis. You know what you get as a benefit, Matt, of being a patron?
Well, so many things, but specifically, I assumed that you're about to talk about the ability to submit questions.
Yeah, the Patreon question. Not as smooth as a transition, Matt. Not as smooth as a transition. But yeah, our one of the benefits is being able to submit a question. This week we got a question that says, "What are the benefits of knowing how to play multiple archetypes versus knowing one inside and out?" So this question's interesting, Matt. One, because it's phrased as though these things might be equal, and then to put them against each other.
Yeah, it's also phrased as though they might be mutually exclusive, which is possibly more interesting.
So why don't you talk about that piece?
Well, I mean, it's obviously going to scale depending on how much Magic you're able or willing to play, but I think that I've definitely found myself in formats where I've known multiple archetypes and also known one deck inside and out, and it was my comfort zone.
Yeah, I can think of a few standard formats where I just played every single deck, and I think that might be easier in something like standard than maybe something like modern or things like that. But even in modern, depending on the length of time they are willing to dedicate, both in number of hours and just like how much modern you get to play subsequent through those hours, right? Like if
Yeah,
eventually,
also just like the longevity too, right?
right,
Like, I
exactly.
mean, if you're going into it fresh, there's going to be a lot of archetypes in modern, but like modern has been filled with the same, 15 decks or whatever for so long that I'm sure that I've played basically every deck that's in modern
Yeah,
several times.
but I think that that's an interesting point to how this question was framed, right? Both, is there a plus minus for both, or are they equal or even? Like, are, like you said, mutually exclusive? For me, the thing about this question that I want to get to is, I think that if you have to pick one, it depends on what your goals are, and that could determine like where you're gonna end up. If your goal is to just be one of the best players in your area, just picking a deck, knowing it every single season, that probably is gonna do you wonders. If you want to just be the best Magic player that you can be, I think that being able to play as many decks and as many archetypes as possible.
So I think that's close to what my feelings are on it, except uh, I'm not necessarily saying that playing one deck is going to make you one of the best players in your area. I think that
That's true.
it's more of a time frame thing, right? Like if you need to win a tournament, in 2 weeks,
Right.
you're gonna be way better off just picking one deck and playing it as much as you can. But
Right.
if you're trying to be the best Magic player that you can be, playing multiple decks is a better way to go. Because
Yeah.
the thing is, you're going to be throwing percentage points by playing a worse deck, no matter what deck you pick, some amount of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's just factual, right? Like the deck isn't. You don't gain extra percentage points because you didn't have time to play with the deck, right? Like that's not like. It's not like those percentage points just you get those back for free. The deck's still worse.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Anytime that you're playing a worse deck, you're throwing some percentage away. I mean, knowing your deck better is worth more than anything, though. So like,
But it's about where the tiny edges come in.
If you need to win the tournament that you're trying to play, and you have to choose between playing a deck that you know or playing something that you don't know at all that's slightly better, you should definitely play the thing that you know.
And
but in the long run, you're gonna be a much better Magic player for having tried to play decks that you don't know how to play,
and be more capable of eventually saying, "This deck is enough better that I'm just going to audible."
Right. And yeah, at some point you'll get to where you can just pretty much play, most decks without reps.
Right, and it's just like, okay, well, I think that this deck is substantially better, and now I get to make that decision because throughout most of my time playing Magic, I've picked up as many decks as possible and, tried to learn as much as I could.
Right.
Cool. Well, I think that answers that question. But let's talk to you about a question, Matt. Let's talk about always improving. Every week on the show, we want to talk about what we've been doing to get better at Magic or life in general. Matt, what'd you do to get better at Magic this week, man?
Well, going along with my self-reflection theme for the last couple weeks at least, we were talking about this podcast specifically, and I realized that there might be some things that I am good at in Magic that I don't realize other people are struggling with. And conversely, there are things that I think that I do well that I might not be as good at as I could be. And I'm kind of just learning more of those things. Like this week's podcast specifically is about internal dialogue, and I don't know how much of this I want to go into before we actually get to the training grounds.
No, that's fine.
But the basic idea is during a match, I don't think about anything other than the match in front of me, and that's just been something that's been true as long as I can remember. Magic is the thing that blocks everything out for me, or whatever I'm trying to do, really. I mean, I could be having some of the worst moments in my life, and if I go play a Magic tournament, I just completely forget about all of that.
That's fair. What were some of the things that you realized that you might not be giving as much love to that you could?
So I think that, it was more to do with the same topic. I think that in the other half of this training grounds is basically our internal monologues with
ourselves.
Yeah, with ourselves, and awesome. I think that I am probably more negative with myself than I could be.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about it in this week's episode. For me, this week, played a ton of Magic, played a Pioneer event, Pioneer League, and almost played a Pioneer one. Then I almost played the Modern challenge, but my Pioneer deck doesn't matter anymore. As seems to happen in Pioneer. But I played a ton of Standard. I did a video on Juncat. It was like one of my favorite decks this week. And I also picked up a deck from one of our patrons, Matthew Reichs. He has a Gruul Adventures list, and I had not tried Gruul Adventures yet. When I put that up on Arena, just was completely dominating with it. So trying a bunch of different stuff for a Standard PTQ this week. And it was interesting to kind of like test like your immediate my immediate knowledge of an archetype that like I've played a lot of. I put in X number of reps with the exact list sent to me, made some changes, saw even more improvements, made some changes. It was just kind of nice to have a week where, because I've been playing so much Magic, it was pretty easy for me to iterate, which I haven't felt in a little while.
Nice.
So
Can I add something to this?
Yeah.
So I was playing a little bit of Gruul Aggro recently. A list based on a list that I was playing last season before Field of the Dead and Oko and everything else. And I also came to the conclusion that Gruul Adventures was the place to be rather than just Gruul Aggro. And the way that I came to that conclusion was kind of interesting to me. So I think that the things that I wanted out of Gruul were Lovestruck Beast and Embercleave. And what I was realizing with the Gruul Aggro deck was that there are actually not any 1/1s. So, like, basically, in order to support Lovestruck Beast, you have to play Edgewalling Keeper.
Right.
And that just kind of sent me down the whole Adventures path, because when you're playing Edgewalling Keeper, you're a lot more incentivized to play a lot of Adventures.
Can I tell you the card that surprised me the most, by the way?
What?
The Serpent.
Stonecoil Serpent?
Stonecoil Serpent, because it can either be a large threat or a 1/1 when I need it to attack on a turn with my Lovestruck Beast, which I did not expect.
Right.
I was like, why is this card modal? Like, what is... Why is this a 5/5 or a 1/1?
Right.
So that was interesting for me, and the protection from multicolor was chef's kiss.
Yeah, it comes off. It comes up more often than you would expect.
Yeah,
Definitely.
especially with people like picking up Esper Hero again. So, well, that is it. I don't have a misplay of the week this week because I can't open Google Drive because I had to restart my computer. You guys don't want to hear about it, but we'll give you an extra misplay of the week next week because I'm sure I'll have a lot of them at the PTQ. We're not going to do power rankings with you. We were actually going to do power rankings on Pioneer. We were going to do it throughout the whole time since the last ban, and then a banning happened. So now it's now, Matt.
Yeah, TLDR, Mono Black was great. Field of the Dead decks were pretty good, and Once Upon a Time decks were pretty good, and then they all got banned.
Do you think that this hurts Green Devotion enough to kill it, or do you think Green Devotion is now once again the de facto green deck because it has the 8/1 drops?
Yeah, I believe that Green Devotion could still be good. I also think that Green Devotion isn't as reliant on the 1-3 scheme as the other elf decks were.
Right. I mean, if you think specifically about the Simic deck, that deck really cared a lot about that.
Yeah, I mean the Gruul deck too, right? Like you're just basically trying to play a turn 2 Rabble Master every game.
Sure,
That was the whole deck.
Or the worst Legion War boss.
Yeah, well they're both Rabble Masters. That was. It is a worse version of Rabble Master, but it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. So do you think Green Devotion lives? Do you think Mono Black lives?
I would be surprised if Mono Black still is a deck.
Yeah. Do you think?
I think that one got hurt the most, if any. Well, aside from Field of the Dead decks, right? Like obviously, like Bantfield doesn't work in its current incarnation. Maybe there's some kind of a ramp deck, but
it's
certainly not.
They're not nearly going to be as good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, that is going to do it for our Pioneer talk this week. Thanks, Wizards, for the banning. Gosh. But let's get into our main topic. So this week, like Matt said, we're talking about internal dialogue. And for me, this is talking about two things, Matt. What we think about during a match and what we think about ourselves about and around Magic and ourselves, right? So it's kind of twofold. And the original point of this topic was actually going to just be the first piece. And then I did research for the episode, and I wanted to talk about the second piece. And I also wanted to do it because I think that this reflects something in me and how I think that kind of this will be different for you and me in quite a few ways, I think. You're nodding your head. I think you agree.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm nodding. I realize the people listening to the audio version probably can't hear that, but no. I also just prefer not to give a lot of confirmation noises because I don't think it is great for the podcast.
But do you like the jingling ice?
The jingling ice.
Yeah.
I think that's neutral for me.
Neutral. Matt's neutral on the ice, but the podcast listeners love it. They said so on Twitter. So Matt, let's start with this because you kind of already hinted at this. What are your thoughts? What do they consist of throughout a match of Magic?
I honestly am not thinking about anything other than the game during a match of Magic. Like once I sit down for a match, I'm not only not thinking about anything, that happened to me that day or that I'm going to be doing later or anything like that, but I also am not thinking about what my opponent thinks about me or, what I think about my opponent or anything like that.
Do you remember who our episode 13 guest was?
I do not.
You weren't on the episode. Does that help you?
Was it John Finkel?
It was John Finkel.
I thought it might be him, but I wasn't sure what episode that was.
So do you know what John said in that episode when we talked to what do you think about during a match?
I do, because this is actually what I was thinking about when I just gave my answer.
What did he say?
He said, if I'm ever taking a long time, it's because I'm thinking about whether I can possibly go get Indian food for the third time in a row tonight.
You know what's funny is I can never figure out if I thought he was serious about that. Do you think he was serious?
Maybe. I mean, I am not sure that I've actually listened to the episode, to be honest with you. I've heard this, third party, so I'm obviously paraphrasing what he said a lot, but
yeah, but that's about what he said.
But it did seem like he might have been also slightly offended by Casey's take on him as a player. So,
well, it's really funny because I think that when I'm typically doing the best and what I'm thinking about during a match as a Magic is typically the match, my opponent's hand, what's in my hand. Like, it's turning everything into like taking the match and making it little micro pieces for me makes it easier to digest, and then it also blocks out the things around me because I'm focusing on these little things.
Right.
And when I'm doing worse, it's because I'm hardy darting around. I'm like looking at the match next to me, or I'm thinking about getting Indian food for the third time. And if my wife is going to get mad that I'm overdrawing our checking account for Indian food, those are the times that I'm not doing my best. Do you find that you ever do get distracted? If you do you find it hurts your game?
I think that the only times that I ever get distracted is when a game is not particularly close. Basically, if one player should be conceding the game, then I kind of check out mentally. But
okay, does that cause you to lose?
I mean, like I said, it's normally when I'm either so far ahead that I can't lose or so far behind that I can't win.
Sure. Okay.
So.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I don't know. I just never really find distractions. I mean, I know I've brought this up several times on the podcast, but my focus is very narrow. It's not even that it's like particularly good focus, but it's whatever I'm focusing on, nothing else comes in.
I think that's just a super talent, personally, as somebody.
I mean, it would be a good talent if I could turn it off. But the problem is I also am oblivious to things that happen around me. Like,
that's fair.
To a kind of scary level.
Yeah, I know that your alarm can go off for hours at a time.
Yeah. I mean, among other things, it's just it's wild sometimes. Like, when I finally notice stuff around me and my surroundings, and I'm like, wow, how is it possible that I've gone 2 days without noticing this thing sitting there? Or sometimes longer than that. It'd be like a year or whatever.
Yeah, I would not say that I am oblivious to things around me. I am like way too conscientious about every little thing that's going on around me, to a point that I think is detrimental for me. A lot of times during Magic, I know that I had a top 8 match of a PBDQ that like I could not play because so much was happening around me. It's probably one of the worst matches of Magic I've ever played. I got really mad at the players. I got mad at the judge. I was just like, this is like not possible for me, But I don't know. I think that for me, my internal dialogue in a game of Magic can vary depending on my mood. But it certainly is correlated with thinking about the match and honing in on it for me to be doing better.
That makes sense.
So this one I think is interesting. And I can go first. Do you ever tell yourself a story about a match or an event during it? And yes, I do. And typically the ones that I do the best at are ones I'm telling myself a story about. But it's not like oh, this is what's going to happen. It's more like I'm just going to win. So, typically when I have that mindset and I have that belief going into an event, I do actually find that I do better. Matt, I don't think that's true of you.
I'm not sure. Like, I find that sometimes having higher hopes certainly helps. I mean, it's basically true of everybody that once you do something the first time, it becomes much easier to do that. And I think a lot of that is because you just don't have the self-doubts anymore.
Right.
Which is, another part of it's like kind of the same general idea as telling yourself that, it's going to happen for you.
So, I mean, I can't speak to you, for you, I should say. But did you have any of this at your Pro Tour?
Did I tell myself that I was going to win any matches?
Yeah.
No.
So what was the story you were telling yourself going into that event?
The story I was telling myself going into that event was, why is Black-Red the best deck and why am I not playing it?
Okay. Did that story impact your event?
I don't think so. I honestly, I drafted okay. I won my first round in draft and then lost the next 2, and then I did not win a round of constructed because my deck was awful.
Okay. I had a different experience. I was really excited for the draft portion going into the tournament. Like, I felt like I was ahead of the curve, and everybody. Apparently, I was wrong, so I don't know anything. But and then obviously my deck came together. I 3-0'd my draft. I was feeling on top of the world. Um, and then I lost a really rough match against Temur Ascendancy or Jeskai Ascendancy combo, where like they milled me out and that was rough. And then I immediately won my next round to lock myself in for day 2. And what was interesting is that once that happened, I'm worried the wheels kind of came off because like I had achieved my goal for the tournament. And I am like really bad at this, Matt. I don't know if you have this, but like when I achieve a goal, everything else is just like, all right, well, guess I'm done now. And I think that's one of the reasons why like I do so much better at events where like I'm gonna win this, because like that's the mindset I need to kind of achieve what I want to achieve at that, like the most that I can achieve. It's funny because we're gonna be doing a new segment next year during the Always Improving segment where we're gonna compete against each other, and we're gonna have rules for 1Ks and probably MTGO challenges, and we're gonna battle against each other to see who can get the most caches or the most wins. And I think that this will help me a lot, like kind of forcing myself into a position where there's no splits allowed, so I'm just gonna go and win these things.
Right. Yeah, I find that I don't have that problem. For one, I think that my goals are set in a way that is unrealistic most of the time, but very, very well for when I'm doing well. Like it's certainly not like I'm ever going to be like, oh, well, I got to my goal and now, the rest is gravy, because I just never have those kind of goals, right?
Sure.
I don't have. I never set up a goal that's like, oh, I'm going to day 2 this, or I'm going to top 8 this even. Like my goal is always to win the tournament. And I'm also very good at adjusting my goals on a micro level as things happen. Like, rarely do my goals stay the same for the entire tournament long.
What do you mean?
So, like, if my goal is to, like, my goal is always to win the tournament, right? But, like, you can still have, all right, I got to get to, this record to make day 2, which is part of the process, right? But then once I get to 7-0, I'm like, all right, well, my new goal is to 9-0 this tournament or whatever, and like then the next goal would be to win the next few to draw into top 8 or whatever, and then the next one is to win that match, and like those goals just change as the round goes on, never really living in the.
It's funny. That's how I play GPs, and I actually worry that that's why I like sometimes will miss day 2.
I never really live in the moments of we got to the goal, now we need to make a new one. It's just like as soon as the goal becomes accomplished, there's already a new goal.
Okay. I like that. I might try to adopt that mindset. Kind of force it upon myself. I find that I have a lot of success changing things when I do it like that. When it's just like, okay, well now I'm going to do this. Like I've given the example on the podcast of refilling my ice tray at my house. Like we didn't have an ice maker when I first got married, and so like I am a person that loves ice. So if like every time I would walk into the kitchen, I just break the ice tray, dump it into the ice container and refill it again. And every time I got ice, I would do the same thing so that all the excess ice was there, because it was just a quality of life improvement. I just forced myself to do it. I just recently did that with dishes. I just rinse off my dishes now because I hate doing dishes, so I might as well rinse them off. I think the same thing can be applied to Magic in a lot of ways, where it's like, okay, well, I hate this part of the tournament when I'm like thinking about these things, so I'm just going to do this part of the tournament now instead and break the tournament into chunks. I think that actually will be really helpful for me. Do you think there was a time in Magic where this changed for you? I have one that I've told on the podcast like way back in the day that I don't think we've told in a long time.
Okay.
It was the MTG Open in Utah, the one and only MTG Open at mtgopen.com that I think is gone. And round 1, I got paired against Alex Sittner, who's the owner of Oasis Games now. I think he was then too, actually. But when we intentionally drew, because I was playing a deck that wanted to play against Blue-White Control, and he was playing a deck that wanted to play against Blue-White Control, and we were like, this actually might be higher EV for us. I don't know if we were correct. It's whatever. But I got to play against Control a bunch of times, and at one point we were both 3-0-1. I was like, oh man, sweet, one more to go, or something to him. Or it might have been 2 more to go, I'm not sure. And then Alex said to me, no, I've got X, whatever I said plus 3. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, like, that's how many rounds are left in this event. My goal is not just to top 8, like, I'm going to do what I can to win. and it really like had that shift for me, where it's like, okay, I'm thinking about the tournament too small, and also not taking it one round at a time. And it was really interesting to kind of see both things. I was both looking ahead to the wrong piece, and also not worrying about my next match.
Yeah, I think that the latter is honestly even more important. Like, I think, as much as I say that the goalposts change every round, they do between rounds. When I'm in a match of Magic, though, like, if I can forget what my record is, that's the best case scenario.
Right.
No matter what it is.
Right. And was also a piece of advice that Alex gave me that day. Win the next one, and it's not that, it's this. And it was, I don't know, that was just like a big change for me, a big click in my head in my Magic career. Do you have one? Do you have a moment that this changed for you, or was this always this way?
Well, I think that as far as internal dialogue goes, there was definitely a point as a Magic player where I did care a lot about whether the person that I was playing against thought I was playing well. Like, I had a lot to prove in Magic in my mind. I also had, I would think about how good my opponent was, like from not a game level though, but like from a very external level. Like I don't know, like it was more intimidating to play against good players.
Sure.
So I think that changed for me over time, but I think that just more comes with experience.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's talk about the second piece, because we kind of talked about the first piece and during the match and throughout the event, right? But I want to talk about that second piece of kind of what do we tell ourselves about Magic and ourselves throughout these events and kind of throughout these rounds. I read an article in Psychology Today that talked about how having a negative internal dialogue on both fronts can be very harmful, kind of about the things that you're doing, like whether you're going to work or whether you're playing Magic, and then also negative dialogues about like how you feel about yourself. This article kind of talked about how they kind of talked about like how higher self-esteem is a way to combat this, right? But these can vary from things like, why am I even playing this event? I'm just going to lose, to my deck is so bad, I'm so unlucky, right? One of them is like an outside thing that you're having a negativity about, and one of them is like, obviously, like you brought this bad deck, or maybe you think you're terrible. You know what I mean? And they're both not exactly helping you achieve any of your goals at the time.
Right.
But so it says you can do a couple things. I don't really want to go over the list, Matt, but it was interesting that and I can post the list in the notes for people, but we had listened to a podcast called Beyond the Metagame, and you had an interesting point about kind of what this article says and what that podcast says that I really wanted to hear from you.
So I think the basic idea of this article is that more positive thoughts. I haven't read this article to be clear, but it seems like they're trying to raise your self-esteem, right? So like more positive thoughts are very helpful when you're trying to do that.
Or that positive thoughts are more likely to lead to new ideas and things like that is also a theme of this, right? Where it's like if I'm being negative on myself, even if I have a new idea or even if I have a line of thinking, I'm not going to be as susceptible to it in a negative headspace.
Yeah, that's interesting because like you said, we both listened to an episode of Beyond the Metagame, which is a Smash Brothers podcast, and this one in particular was about
mental health.
I forget. Was it about mental health? I forget what the actual topic of the podcast.
I think so.
Okay, they had a sports psychologist or something on there.
Correct. Yep.
And anyway, he was pointing out that it's actually not as important to have either positive or negative thoughts. It's more about productive and unproductive thoughts. You can have both positive thoughts that are unproductive and negative thoughts that are productive. And either way, the productive thoughts are going to help you win more than the unproductive thoughts, whether they're positive or negative.
And that's absolutely true. We just talked about how like my mindset of like wanting to make day 2 was detrimental to my ultimate goal of qualifying for the next Pro Tour with Quentin.
Yeah, I mean, even more than that, it's more like thinking about. I mean, you can say things like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the example that they gave of a positive thought that's not productive. Basically, like if you're trying to cheer yourself up about something, but it's not necessarily
constructive.
Yeah, just it's not pushing you towards how do I get better. If it's just like, oh, we'll get them next time or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm happy with my performance or whatever. These thoughts are fine, but like they're also not the thoughts that are going to make you better.
Yeah, I think that understanding that some positive thoughts cannot be constructive is totally acceptable. Do you go against the theory that having a positive outlook on things is more likely to breed into success of some kind?
I haven't done enough research on that topic to be honest with you, but I don't think that it's if it's more likely that could be true, but I don't think it's
It certainly doesn't have to be a one-to-one correlation. That's for
right.
sure. I mean, and the thing that we're going to talk about, is kind of goes with that, right? And I kind of just want to talk about what kind of my last year and a half or so struggling with imposter syndrome, and maybe a little bit beyond that, to be honest. Because this is something that like I deal with all the time. To the point where I've had friends, Manny, former coach of the podcast, told me to get like go talk to somebody about it. And I think that I felt this in Magic and in life. In work, I am probably the only person that has my job without a college degree, and like I feel like horrible imposter syndrome about that kind of stuff. And every time I make a decision, I worry that it's questioned and things like that, and that I don't know what I'm doing. In Magic, I have this podcast with these people that listen to me, and what the heck do we know? Kind of feeling a lot of the time. And in parenting, I feel like the biggest imposter syndrome of all. I've got this little person that thinks that I know literally everything. And little does he know, I know literally nothing. But I can't tell him that. Then he won't listen to me, and that would be a problem. I know more than he does. But no, I think that like kind of struggling with those things for me has kind of taught me a lot in Magic in itself. And I talk about how even if I don't win the tournament, right? I remember the PTQ in Boise that we just went to a couple months ago, right? Where like every round somebody would come up to me, good job. I'm like, yeah, thanks. They're like, yeah, you're doing great. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna win. And like I would just say that every round, I'm gonna win. And it's like, oh, is he being cocky? It's like, no, I'm actually trying this new mindset out to see how it impacts me. It was really funny in the last one play that we played against each other, Matt. Like my goal in that tournament was just to beat you. I was like, I'm just gonna beat Matt this tournament. I don't even care where I end up, but I just want to beat Matt.
You got your chance and succeeded even.
Yeah, and I think that like, you sent me a podcast on imposter syndrome, and one of the things that he said in the podcast is like, if you don't think everyone else in the room is feeling exactly how you're feeling, that they also don't know, and they also could be doing way better, and that they're also worried that everybody else is thinking those things. It kind of, we all feel that way at times. We all have these feelings. I mean, it was like a thing in Magic for years, still sometimes is, to just talk about how terrible you are.
Right. What I thought was interesting in that podcast specifically was that he was talking to a lot of really successful people, and he realized that imposter syndrome and success they have almost nothing to do with each other. Like you can be the most successful person in the world and still not believe that you are qualified.
Yeah, it's a real struggle for me, and it was really interesting when thinking about like how my internal dialogue has changed in Magic since starting to suffer from imposter syndrome at work, and in life in a lot of ways, and it's crazy to just kind of think about that stuff, and I hope that if there's anything that listeners can take away from this training grounds, as like this was kind of a conversation between you and me for the most part, and I mean. I don't know. Like, I hope that you can take away something that will help you improve and understand that you're going to be different. I mean, Matt, I've seen you play Magic. You don't have a. That's why you should sit in the middle. That's the honest truth. Is that then nobody can talk to each other.
Because then there's no possible way anybody will ask your advice.
No, I'm just saying then nobody can talk to each other. You're sitting in the middle. The other two people can't talk to each other. That's the best team lineup. It's your team Magic superpower. But no, I think that like that's different than somebody like me, and everybody needs to realize that what works for you is Matt can't tell you what works for him, and then suddenly you can do that, and it'll just work for you all of a sudden. Like you have to figure out what is my internal dialogue like? What is it doing to my Magic game? And kind of adjust from there. Man, self-reflection is a lot, Matt.
Yeah, it definitely is. Again, I'm working on it, but it's something. It's definitely one of my biggest weaknesses.
So how do you think that it could help you? Like you kind of mentioned that during the always improving, but I don't think we kind of circled back to it.
How do I think that self-reflection can help me?
Well, you just were talking about how you thought that you were bad at it and that you were improving at it. So what do you think that you're doing to improve other than just doing the podcast?
Well, I mean, what am I doing? What am I doing to try to reflect better?
Yeah.
Just taking time aside to actually think about it. That's just not something that I've generally done. I've even in the past considered self-reflection to be not worthwhile, but I think that I have come around to the conclusion that I was just definitely wrong.
What led you to that conclusion?
Well, when I come up, basically, whenever somebody asks me an open-ended question that most people have really good answers to because they do a lot more self-reflection than I do, I've realized the truth is that I can't notice my own weaknesses or my own strengths as well as other people can, or even the things that I like or the things that I don't like, because I don't give those things as much thought as anybody else.
Sure.
Or I
Okay.
shouldn't say anybody else. I'm sure there are people that are like me and don't self-reflect, but
This was interesting. I hope it was helpful for people. It was different. It was certainly a different style of training grounds, and was a little bit more open. So if you like it, let us know. If you want us to go back to talking about Pioneer, we're happy to do that. But this was a topic that I wanted to talk about. But I'm also happy to talk about casting Burning Tree Emissary into Garruk and Artarka. So, we all have our kinks. That one's mine. With that being said, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg and become a patron of the show. It means the world. Every time somebody does it, it means a lot to us. You can find me at Spencer H. You can find Matt at The Witchling. You can find the show at CCMTG. You're our sponsor over at mtgoasis.com. You can join the conversation by joining the Facebook group and becoming a patron of $5 or more. That's the Construct Critics group. And you can join the Discord to talk to other people who are trying to improve at Magic. We post memes in there. Mason pops in every once in a while. And then one day Matt will show up. Or not.
I've been on the Discord a couple times.
But yeah, it's a great place to kind of talk to other people. I know that obviously we're running those tournaments in there, so check that out. Those links on the show note. Let's get to our deck doctor, Matt. So this week we have a deck doctor. If you want to submit a deck doctor to the show where we talk about the things that we love, the things that we would change, and where we think the deck that you're playing stands, and think about donating that $5 or more to patreon.com/ccmtg. But this deck is the duplicate deck. Matt, this is the Risen Reef deck. You familiar with this one?
I am not sure I'm familiar with Quasi Duplicate. It's like 3 mana copy, something you control, and then it has Jumpstart.
Yep, and you can jumpstart it by discarding a card. Yep. So this deck is 4 Gilded Goose, 4 Leafkin Druid, 2 Paradise Druid, 3 Brazen Borrower, 2 Quasi Duplicate, 4 Risen Reef, 3 Teferi Time Leveler, 4 Nissa, 4 Cavalier of Thorns, 2 Agent of Treachery, 4 Hydroid Krasis, Matt's favorite card, 4 Temple Garden, 4 Breeding Pool, 4 Hollow Fountain, 1 Castle Ventress, 1 Garen Brig, 5 Forests, 3 Islands, 1 Fable Passage, 1 Plains. The sideboard is 2 Hydra, those are the voracious variety, 2 Mystical Dispute, 1 Negate, 1... You don't like my deck reading?
The Hydra, the voracious variety.
I thought it was good. 3 Thrashing Brontodon, 2 Devout Decree, 1 Finale of Glory, 2 Questing Beast, and 1 Tameo. If you don't like the way I read deck lists, you read them, Matt.
It's fine now. I thought it was great. I left because I thought it was good.
So first of all, I have played this deck a lot. End of last standard, I played the Nissa deck. Not like last standard, like before rotation, I had played this deck. And it was good. It was like really good. It was also really fun. Leafkin Druid. Obviously, that deck didn't have Gilded Goose. It actually had Llanowar Elves, which was a lot better. So that, like, the first thing I want to say is I love this style of deck. I think Duplicate plus the Elemental package was really powerful every time that I tried it. And obviously, Nissa is like just one of the best cards in Standard. I am worried about Gilded Goose, though, Matt.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Gilded Goose does seem a lot more like Lotus Petal in this style of deck than than other decks. I mean, without Oko, it's going to be like that in basically most standard decks that aren't like cat food decks.
Yeah, I that would be my number one concern. Obviously, this deck can grind though, right? Like it has the Risen Reefs and the kind of that package.
Right. My question is, what angle is this trying to attack the metagame from that's not already being facilitated by something else?
So,
Like, where do you think that this deck finds a weakness in the metagame?
do you think so? Is it that different than Bant Ramp? But like other than like just having a better top end?
So
Like they're
that's what
mostly
you,
the
is
same
that,
cards.
is that what you think it is? That what you think it is? You think it's just a way to go over the top of Bant Ramp, and that's the important
I mean,
draw?
I don't know that that's the like. I don't know that that's the draw that I would attack from. But I think that like if you think Bant Ramp is good, and you think that like you need a bigger game than Bant Ramp has, this is like this does that.
It's true, but what about the metagame specifically leads you to believe that that's the direction to attack from?
Uh, well, Mason Clark top aided the CCMTG Discord open with Bant Ramp, and then got Mythic
true.
with it.
That's true. I mean, those are more not the answers I'm looking for, though.
I mean, I was mostly
basically,
joking.
basically,
But
when I am deciding to play a deck that's super off meta, it's because I have assessed what either the threats or the answers are in the format and decided that this deck dodges some of them or lines up well against the threats.
yeah, so I think that that makes a lot of sense, right? But I think that one of the things that this deck might struggle with is like, why is this suddenly about Agent of Treachery and Duplicate? Because obviously the way that this, I mean, because you think, I assume it's because you think Cat Food is one of the best decks,
I do think Cat Food is one of the best decks. Yes,
and I assume that you think Adventures is the other one of the other best decks.
I think that is among them as well. I I think that the Clover Black Green deck is quite a bit better than the regular
Black Green.
Golgari Adventures. I think Golgari Adventures right now is not well positioned, but uh, I think that Jeskai Fires and Cat Food and Black Green Clover are probably the best three decks right now.
Okay. And I can see how this, like, you would want something like this against, you know, the maybe. So you think this deck is good against none of them?
I think that the Fires matchup is probably not good.
Yeah, that would be my first thought, is that you're not very good against the All Sweepers deck.
Right. It's possible that the life gain from Hydroid Crisis, like if you draw a really fast draw with Hydroid Crisis, it's probably going to help you gain enough life to beat the Cat Food deck. It might not be enough to beat Black Green Adventures if they're on the Clover variant and have a particularly combo heavy draw.
Sure. Is the combo deck the Knights deck? Is that the version you're playing?
You could call it a Knights deck. It's just Black Green Adventures, but with
Does it have
like a
Spin
couple.
Swordmaster?
Yes, it has the
Okay.
Is that what it's called? Smitten Swords Master.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's Smitten something. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it plays Lucky Clover in that card, and then a couple of Beanstalk Giants.
I could see this deck being good against aggressively slanted decks just overall. One of the things that I would worry about if that deck is as great as you think it is, like obviously this doesn't do a lot against the breaking up those synergies.
Yeah, I mean that's the big problem I think right now is that the best three decks in the format are combo decks.
Yeah, they're certainly synergy driven decks, and this doesn't do a lot to break them up. But you're a synergy driven deck that is, has some pretty powerful synergies too. So if you just think you're doing the more powerful thing, that could be a reason to play it.
It's true. I mean, like Nissa into Hydroid Crisis is very hard for any deck to beat. That's just going to be true.
Yeah, and I think that's true of Nissa. One thing that if I was gonna make a suggestion is kind of trying to figure out like, is the reason that I'm playing white like the best reason I'm playing white? So for example, we talked about this deck could have a hard time breaking synergies. It's also just like playing Tulsamir could be a huge help for you to be able to do that, right? So like you have these Agent of Treacheries here; those actually aren't very good at breaking up synergies, and that might not be what the format's about. But if you put Tulsamir in that place, that fits pretty well with Quasi Duplicate. That fits pretty well with the Fairy, and could help you in those type of spots.
Which synergies do you think Tulsamir breaks up?
I mean, it certainly like can go out of its way to like kill part of the knight synergies or things like that. Just, killing a knight on board is worth a lot.
It's definitely worth some, but I think that not interacting with the Lucky Clovers is actually the bigger problem.
Well, you can do that in different areas, right? I'm just saying that like if you don't have any interaction in your deck other than Teferi, it's going to be pretty hard to break up those synergies with just a Brazen Borrower.
Sure.
And also one thing to think about is like, you know, should I be playing like Thrashing Brontodon main? Like I'm already playing Gilded Goose as to get it out. Is that something that this format requires, or even that I care about in this format to the point where it's kind of worth it?
Right. Yeah, I think on a card for card basis, this list looks pretty good to me. I haven't tried quasi duplicate, but I can understand what it does. But like you said, I think the Gilded Gooses are just not really working for me. Um, I'm not really sure what to play in that spot. I would definitely play the extra two Paradise Druids. And it makes sense anyway, right? You're not running that many threes that you need to ramp into anyway. So it's not actually a big deal if you're going 2 to 4 instead of 1 to 3.
I think the bigger reason is like if you're going 1 to 3 into Risen Reef, it's not like you're suddenly able to go 5 into Cavalier of Thorns because the food is gone.
Yeah, I mean that's the obvious reason. That's what I was saying when I was equating it to Lotus Petal earlier.
Yeah.
But
I don't think that going white is like a bad idea at all. I think that you obviously can get a lot of. I mean, I like Tolsimir. That's something that I would consider for this deck. And yeah, I mean, I might try something like this out, Matt. This sounds fun.
sure.
Well, that is going to do it. That's where we think your deck stands. That's the things that we love, the things that we change. Thank you so much for that this week, and we'll see everybody next week with another episode of Constructed Criticism.